Welcome. This training video is focused on Math Universal Screeners and is geared specifically towards kindergarten.
Training overview. You should have received a box of screeners for your classroom. We will go over the contents in this presentation. Why and intent, background, design, overview, administration guidance, screener components, grading, next steps, and feedback form.
The District Why. In 2021, Rockland Unified's instructional partners, which included teachers, families, students, and staff, determined that a focus on math improvement is essential for our students' academic success. Common assessments is a foundational component of this work. In Rockland Unified, teachers have had many sources of data to measure student progress in English language arts. The hope is to provide universal screening data in the areas of math in order to determine students' knowledge of foundational skills necessary to mastering grade level expectations. Additionally, we want to provide multiple measures in math, which means that we will continue to use Math for grades 2 through 6. Instruction. These district-wide screeners are not intended to be used as summative assessments for report cards and should be used to help inform all tiers of instruction, including at the classroom level or Tier 1 instruction. These screeners provide teachers with information about areas for possible support or reteaching of foundational skills prior to Tier 1 curriculum instruction. They also help teachers to identify areas for possible Tier 1 intervention. These screeners also help to provide common classroom-based tools to identify specific student needs and measure growth over time. They also identify specific areas for intensive intervention or Tier 2 instruction, which can be administered in small groups. The background of these screeners and our process. Beginning in fall 2021, 18 classroom teachers worked together to identify essential standards for each grade level, with intensive focus on vertical articulation within grade spans. Grade levels drafted questions addressing the essential standards, identified foundational skills necessary to accessing grade level work, and also ensured that assessments were less language heavy as compared to our current district adopted curriculum. Questions were compiled into screeners based on the progression of skills throughout a given school year, and contributing teachers, teams, and learning recovery teachers piloted the screeners. The design of these universal screeners is focused on foundational skills necessary to access grade level content. The baseline assessment is assessing prior grade level skills and progresses through fall, winter, and spring with progressively more difficult skills as you go throughout the year. The screeners are not dependent upon curriculum scope and sequence. The team pulled questions from a variety of resources, including our current math adoption. They are not strategy specific except when the standard algorithm is required. We have also adjusted names and topics to be diverse and age level appropriate. The intent of this spring administration is to be able to gain experience administering the newly created universal screeners, to understand students' experience in taking the screeners, to provide feedback, and calibrate scoring. We also hope to provide teachers with student data that can be used to drive instruction for the remainder of the year. All K-5 Rockland Unified students will take this assessment, with the exception of specified special ed students. 6th grade will also be doing their own universal screener that is on a slightly different timeline than K through 5. Administration guidance. The kindergarten math screeners are designed to be administered in small parts beginning in August, similarly to the BPST, where each scored area is cumulative and is not really designed to be given from beginning to end. We recognize that the amount of time it takes to interview students is significant and is especially challenging for mid-year implementation. Therefore, spring implementation for kindergarten has been modified for this initial administration. For spring 2022, we are asking kindergarten teachers to assess students in only the specified areas in order to provide meaningful feedback in the following areas: number recognition, counting, counting and cardinality, number writing, comparing numbers, and number composition. Each school site has been assigned 2 specific areas to assess. Teachers may assess students in other areas if chosen, but it is not required. Typically, students should be assessed in the areas designated for each assessment period. Skills that are not mastered are designed to be reassessed in the next assessment period. If a student is struggling and the questions are too difficult, a teacher may use their discretion to not move forward. If a student is showing mastery of current skills in baseline, fall, and winter, a teacher may choose to ask questions ahead to measure exceeding. For this spring assessment, teachers will assess the student from the beginning to end in only the specified areas that they've been assigned.
Screener components. The assessment is broken into sections, and there are provided resources to help you administer these sections. There is also a scoring sheet to take the scores from each of those sections. It is recommended that the classroom teacher administer the assessments so that the classroom teacher can make instructional decisions based on the information gathered during the interviews with students. Directions. In your box, you'll find a brightly colored piece of paper. Please be sure to read through the directions prior to administering the screener.
Interview. Kindergarten screeners are designed to be done as an interview with each student, with the exception of the number writing, which can be assessed in small groups or as whole class as appropriate. Assessment questions are available on ESGI if desired, but it is not required. Directions are provided in each section. Again, it is recommended that the classroom teacher administer these interviews. Number recognition. This section will be administered by Cobblestone, Rock Creek, and Twin Oaks. The format of this particular section is interview. There is a resource that is provided to make it more student-friendly. You may want to use additional sheets of paper to minimize the amount of information that students see on this additional resource. You will complete this assessment from the beginning to the end. The B, F, W, and S refer to typical assessment periods of baseline, fall, winter, and spring. But as mentioned, you'll complete the assessment from beginning to end. Counting. This section will be administered by Antelope Creek, Breen, Parker Whitney, and Sierra. This is also an interview section, and because it is all oral, there is no additional resource provided. By administering this from beginning to end, there are some sections that kind of overlap. You may want to start with the last question of, can you count to 100? Or how high can you count? Depending on how well the student does, you can automatically assume that students can count up to 5, 10, and 20. Some of the other questions refer to counting on, and this will assess whether or not a student is able to count starting from a certain number and going on from there. There's also a question of skip counting. Counting and cardinality. This section will be administered by Parker Whitney, Rucola, Rocklinell, and Valley View. This is also an interview, and an additional resource is provided in somewhat of a flashcard format. You may also want to use an additional piece of paper to minimize the amount of information that students see on this assessment. Because we are administering this in spring, you should be able to display the 3 different images. You should be able to ask students to count the items on the resource. Number writing. This section will be administered by Cobblestone, Rocklinell, Valley View, and Sunset Ranch. This section is written. A blank hundreds grid will be provided in your box to help with this, though you are not required to use this additional resource. Teachers may choose to use other existing classroom resources as long as it is assessing the extent of the assessment period. Again, this is not an assessment you would typically use in baseline, and if a student is able to write all the way up to 100, it would be assumed that they can write to 5, to 10, and to 20. And 4 different assessments is not required in order to complete this overall assessment. Comparing numbers. This section will be administered by Antelope Creek, Breen, Sierra, and Sunset Ranch. This is an interview assessment. You may use the flashcards that are provided in the additional resources. When displaying each of the flashcards, it is the teacher's job to ask which number is either larger, greater, or smaller or less, depending on the section of the assessment. Number composition. This section will be administered by Rucola, Twin Oaks, and Rock Creek. This is also an interview section. Resources are provided as quick flashcards, and a tens frame is necessary for comparing numbers. Teachers will need to access 10 two-color counters from their math manipulatives in order to complete this assessment. Again, this one is not typically administered in baseline, and be sure to read the directions carefully, as this section is in 2 parts, subitization and comparing numbers.
Scoring sheet. After you administer and go to score the screener, you will notice a teacher table at the top of each section. A student scoring sheet is provided to compile each section's scores to get a big picture view of students' understanding. Because of the way we are doing the spring screener, your students will only have scores in 2 sections, unless you decide to do more. Cut points at the bottom of the page help to determine students' areas of need and will align to universal screening criteria. If you are interested in exploring other screeners, other grade levels, or other assessment periods, a hyperdoc is available on the hub.
Next steps. With your PLC today, please preview the questions on your screener. The directions will help guide students as needed. Make a plan to assess with your PLC. We recommend completing this assessment prior to spring break. After spring break, please grade these assessments. If you have any answers that are sticky or confusing, please save those to discuss them at the RUSD Learns on April 25th. We will input these scores on revised universal screening spreadsheets that will be provided after spring break. After you've given the screener, it is important to us that you provide feedback on your experience. We are looking to gather information regarding assessment time, assessment content, areas of challenge, and any additional information you would like to provide. Down the road. These screeners are just a starting point. With this assessment information, we hope to be able to better meet students' individual math needs, improve our overall math instruction, increase teacher effectiveness, and provide teachers with targeted math teaching strategies, intervention resources, and math progress monitoring tools somewhere down the road. We would like to thank the many individuals that helped provide input and feedback in this process. This work was done in collaboration with classroom teachers, learning recovery teachers, instructional coaches, principals, and district leadership. Several classroom teachers graciously gave up valuable time with their students to provide key input into this process, and we are forever grateful. Thank you for administering this spring assessment. If you have further questions, please feel free to reach out to Kylie Bray or Nell Hildebrand or your site principal, and we'd be glad to help as we can.